सब्सक्राइब करें, प्रेस करें बेल आइकॉन और पाएं मुंबई, नवी मुंबई एवं बॉलीवुड की ताजा तरीन खबरें।
Would make 5G business viable in India for the incumbent operators, because incumbent operators have made huge investments. They are now into 4G. And we see 4G to 5G is an evolution, not a revolution. It has got to evolve into 5G. So what do you think would be the use cases that we take off with? And the standards thereof. Thank you.
Very interesting question, and thank you. I've come to realize 3 or 4 things which I'll preface before I respond to your question specifically on these domains. First of all, I think the fact that there is a very strong connection between 5G and applications is a key driving factor for this cricket plus hockey analogy that I use. India is fortunate that we have a very vibrant communications industry and a very vibrant information technology industry. The reason that this synergy is going to play an increasing role in the development of 5G standards as well as applications is underpinned by the fact that India is also a huge market for many of the things that this combined strength can deliver to the country. Each of the industries could do so, but the combination is really a mouth-watering opportunity. The third dimension, which is a preface dimension, is that the world that we live in, and now I'm not restricting myself only to India, but the world at large is realizing that there are completely new ways of doing business that can be enabled by this combination. Klaus mentioned smart highways. Now, that sort of thought process could not have existed 30 years ago. It is enabled by information technology and communication technology coming together. In a very large market like India, this new way of doing business and profiting from it is extremely exciting. What is this new way of doing business? There are 3 or 4 characteristics which seem to be important. First is that these businesses can realistically aim for extremely large markets. The scalability of each that telecom industry has given us in India with 1 billion plus end users and worldwide running into several billion is unprecedented. From the information technology side, the ability to give what we call a tailored, individual, personalized experience all the time, in real time, at that scale of billions is unprecedented. The largest companies today worldwide, conventional companies, retailers, banks, airlines and so on, would be lucky if they have tens of millions, maybe perhaps a couple of hundreds of millions of customers. The telecom industry and the ICT industry are the only ones which seem to have broken free from this number. Carriers now have hundreds of millions of customers. And some of the platform plays in the information technology now have billions of end users. And they are able to provide high quality experience to hundreds of millions and perhaps millions of users. So this is one characteristic, extraordinary scale and delivering experience. The second characteristic of the new way of doing business is the ability to build what some of us are calling exponential value models. Professor Bhaskar talked about business should see value, but business value is no longer conventional linear exchange of goods and services and value coming back. It is about what we are calling exponential models, which means that large numbers of people doing unit transactions amongst themselves can in turn create a series of interrelated transactions, which can then multiply the value. So the fact that two people are exchanging data, information, or goods or services, that fact itself now becomes an additional product, which can be monetized, and so on. So Internet of Things is building premise that data can be now a tradable, saleable, valuable product. And data therefore can generate exponential value. The third attribute, which I think this combination of 5G and IT is building, is ecosystems. No longer is one industry siloed in saying that I will do retail, I will do telecom, I will do IT, I will do banking, I will do financial services. Because of the connected end user at the end of literally every value chain, there is now a possibility to create completely new value chains, and not just value chains but value webs in an ecosystem fashion. This is the success behind many of the marketplaces that are commonplace. Even in India, we saw the headlines recently on a very large retail marketplace exchanging hands. It is not a conventional retailer model, it is a retail marketplace model which has been created by this capability. So ecosystems is another avenue. And lastly, all of these business models are underpinned by an assumption that compute capacity, communications capacity, bandwidth are abundant. I spend a lot of time in my job with all the hotspots around the world, in India of course, but in Silicon Valley, Israel, Europe, Helsinki, Finland, China, Japan, all over the world. What is amazing in this combination of ICT is that we are the only ones who think about the world in an unconstrained resource model. Everybody else is constrained by something, constrained by capital, constrained by resource, constrained by talent, constrained by physical capacity. We are the only ones who will say, casually say, oh, we're going to increase bandwidth by a factor of 1,000. We're going to reduce latency by a factor of 1,000. Or increase compute capacity by 10 to the power 6. These numbers don't exist in the conventional business world. This is what we can teach the conventional business world. So that is the preamble. So there is a new way of doing business. India has a good position because of the fact that we have two leading capabilities in this new way of doing business. And we are a large market. Now coming to Mr. Ramchandran's original question, what is it that lies ahead from a 5G perspective, and what are the challenges that, as a member of the HLF, I am grappling with, and many colleagues here are grappling with me in that time. The first and foremost is that we have to make a choice. Where do we start? Which domains do we want to look at? The choices are enormous. We have got, on one hand, large-scale governmental initiatives, smart city, clean India, smart agriculture, smart villages, intelligent transportation, public safety, disaster preparedness, many others, even smart highways and intelligent transportation. So the first is to find out which of these make sense from an India standardization perspective. So that because we're a large market, if we lay out the end use cases, this is what is appropriate for India. From a scale perspective, from a business model perspective, it could be that we want to create exponential value. It could be that we want to deliver extraordinary experience to billions of customers. It could be that we want to create ecosystems. Whichever those priorities that I mentioned earlier apply to these domains, that's the choice that we have to make first. You have to pick the domains and say, in these domains, healthcare, extraordinary resilience, extraordinary experience given to the patient, to the doctor, to the health provider, and robustness in terms of scale. These are my three key requirements. The same thing could be argued for transportation or for smart cities. So that's the first step that we have to do. The second step is for us to say, given these requirements, in these first 3, 4, 5 domains that we might take, what are the implications for what I would call the enabling layers? And here the fun starts, because some of the enabling layers have a very strong information technology component. Professor Bhaskar mentioned IoT as part of his remarks. That's a true interdisciplinary space. Companies like TCS are investing in IoT, classic telecom companies are investing, equipment vendors are investing, everybody else is investing as well. Cloud is another very strong enabling technology which comes from an adjacency as far as 5G is concerned, but it's a very important component of what 5G will be able to do in these domains that I've talked about. So there is a set of enabling technologies, whether it's IoT, whether it's cloud, cybersecurity is going to be huge. Because if you're going to have millions of connected individuals, devices, things, cars, highways, factories, equipment of all sorts, lights in this room, for example, you better have a very robust way of ensuring that minimum quality of service is guaranteed, which is not compromising. So you need to borrow from the security community on what they can bring to the table in this kind of market. So there is a domain layer, and then there is an enabling technologies layer. These two layers in turn will place a lot of requirements on the classic 5G standardization activities. What does this mean in terms of latency? What does this mean in terms of resilience? What does it mean in terms of carrier capacity, equipment, cost, scale, etc., etc. So this is the standardization mindset that I'm articulating to you in a very brief way. It starts with the strengths, the market, what the business expects as value at scale, what are those domains that we need to worry about, and then what is the layered way by which we can approach standardization so that we can live up to the potential. So we have the potential, we have a great cricket team, we have a great hockey team. Now we have to make sure we have a great combined capability there so that we play something which is in between and are able to win the World Cup in not just one, perhaps both the disciplines. Thank you.
Organizing this panel and bringing all these stalwarts who have been responsible for, even the initiation of standardization, and I really think it's a paradigm, it's a different paradigm or a different leap in terms of the technical ecosystem that we have a standardization body, and it's really a very important catalyst to take this ecosystem to the next level. And hearing them speaking from their heart, I mean, even though I've been with DSI, but in our governing board meeting we don't talk about this stuff. So having them speak from their heart has been very, very illuminating for me. So thanks a lot for that. Now, coming back to your question on what are the lessons learned and what we want to do in DSI. So I think one of the key things here is that it is now an accepted fact that standardization, participation in standardization, playing at global levels in standardization is a necessity for India to realize its aspirations of socio-economic development using technology, which means leapfrogging and embracing emerging technology. It requires, as Bhaskar very rightly said, that if we do it right, it explodes. And standardization is that key to doing it right. If our requirements are not being incorporated into standards, the market will not happen. People will continue to live the way they are living. So unless our requirements are being addressed by the industry, and that will happen through standardization, then only this market will happen, right? And we've seen many examples of that again and again and again. We may pour in all this stuff in smart cities, but the sense, that money can go down the drain. Nothing may happen if we don't do the standardization, right? So, so I think one of the lessons learned in DSI, and I think it's becoming a norm now, where the key roles that standardization has to play in our aspiration to use technology for our development, and also our aspiration to be a global player in development of products and technology, a supplier of technology, right? We have a very large, I was at AICTE the other day, and they said the capacity in India is 37 lakhs capacity per year of engineering and technology students. is there today, right? So this capacity can really enable all these new technologies, not only for India but also for the globe. And using this technology effectively, standardization can play a role there. Then the other lesson is that standardization capability is a hard thing to build. It's not easy, right? We can play, gilli danda, right? But for us to go and win the World Cup is a hard thing. A lot of investment, a lot of long-term commitment of a lot of people is required if we, in a sustained way, want to be amongst the the partners. So Adrian said that we are an equal partner, but are we really equal? Let's think about it. What will it take for us to be that equal partner? There is a huge amount of investment by the government, by industry, by academia, by individuals, and commitment that is needed for us to build standardization. And that's the lesson we are learning in TSDSI, over and over again. And the third lesson that we've learned is that standardization, the way we need to do for emerging technologies. We've always been in this laggard model. Somebody defines standards, we pick them up and we put it in our R&D, and then we buy the technology and try to force fit it in our ecosystem and see whether it will work or not. And maybe tweak it a little here and there, right? But now we want to influence that. We want to build intelligent transport in a way that it will work in Delhi and Bangalore, right? Or Mumbai, right? And not the way it works in Geneva or Barcelona or San Diego, right? So that requires a whole ecosystem. You cannot just take standardization as the TSDSI will do standardization, NIPS will come and standard specifications will come out, or we will take what the 3GPP has done and transpose them and call them TSDSI standards. That's not what will cut it. There's a whole ecosystem that has to happen around it. There's the pre-standardization ecosystem, the research, the innovation, the IP development, which needs to funnel and feed into the standardization ecosystem. And then there is the post-standardization ecosystem, which needs to take the standards to influence again research, innovation, product development, and deployment, pilots, which trials, which will realize the dream of why we are building the standardization today. So there are these are, I think, the three key learnings that we've had. And am I supposed to address my second part as well? Okay.
Persisting, and when they come up with thousands of pages of standardization documents, whether it is 3GPP or IT and influence, we have to be there, apply our mind, and like we have always been saying, diligently make our inputs so that we go on to Professor U.B. Desai from IIT Hyderabad. Sir,
going on the non-EWP voting that we have done, we have some fantastic we need support from government. Government support now is sort of, I would say, very, very strong. Mr. Shivshelam is here. I think, I presume the Secretary DOT also will be coming shortly. So that is very strong. They have also sanctioned, I think as was mentioned perhaps by some of my colleagues earlier, a very, very big initiative for 5G. And unprecedented in the history of Indian research and technology development, the support that the government is giving us. I think we need equal support from Indian industries. And I think when we participate at 3GPP,
there are a couple of groups at least. There is one called Network Slicing Type. They are doing some amazing work on defining and these people out there whom we didn't know anything about previously, whether it's the energy providers, whether it's the transportation companies, whether it's the port authorities, they are now engaging with us that this is what we expect from connectivity technologies like 5G. So that is a very interesting change. So I think India could do very well to up the game and start participating in some of these. The other thing I would highlight is the need to start establishing exchange programs. Exchange programs between academia, for example. So I come from the UK. So in the UK we have some very exciting work going on by King's College London, by 5G Innovation Centre in Surrey, by Bristol University, which is next door to me. So I think we could very easily, we have Professor Abhay Karandikar, we have Mr. Bhaskaran. So I think we could now have this exchange program developed between the IITs of India, who are obviously the most premium institutions you would find anywhere in the world. They could now start to reach out to these institutions and start working on demos to demonstrate what value we can deliver using 5G to the larger society. But I think the important question now is interoperability. We know 5G is not going to work on its own. We know 5G would be deployed to begin with mainly as hotspots. And 5G would have to rely on other current and legacy technologies, whether it's for coverage reasons, whether it's for service continuity reasons and whatnot, or even commercial reasons. So the standard already recognizes many of these aspects. So 3GPP, for example, has defined this 5G NR-LTE dual connectivity at the radio level. 3GPP has also identified many options where a 4G core network, the EPC core, would be able to work with the 5G new radio. And likewise, the 5G new core network would be able to work with the LTE radio. And the reason 3GPP has done this is to ensure homogeneous implementation and seamless coexistence of all these technologies. Because if you look at it, technology typically has a life cycle of 20 to 30 years. When it reaches beyond 50% adoption in the marketplace, and when it peaks out and starts to get onto the declining curve. So this is a very, very long time, and we know that 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G would have to coexist. And that brings in a lot of challenges. 5G as a technology does not have native support for SMS, does not have native support for voice. 4G also did not have native support to begin with for voice. 4G was primarily designed for delivering mobile broadband, but then voice over LTE capability was built on it. Now, if 5G does not have native support for voice and SMS, it would have to rely on the voice over LTE capabilities of LTE. And that brings in very immediate need for interoperability between technologies. And there are lots and lots of other reasons why interoperability must exist. But the challenge there is, how do we accomplish that interoperability? Interoperability is not very easy. Because when you say interoperability between 4G, 5G and 3G and 2G, it essentially means interoperability between systems, between services, between capabilities that each of these different technology domains constitute. So you can start to think of interoperability of roaming scenarios, interoperability of protocols. Now protocols, again, many of us don't realize how complex it's going to be, because a point was made by Mr. Anand Krishnan, very interesting point, which I simply loved. It's not just about communication services. Communication services, information technologies, they are all coming together, they are all converging for the very first time. We have been talking about convergence for the last 20, 30, 40 years. but it's truly happening now for the first time. So, few months ago, 3GPP took the very conscious decision of doing away with some of the very well-established protocol families that we use in the industry for the last decades. GTP as a protocol is used by every operator, by every mobile network operator. That has been thrown away as a control protocol. 3GPP has consciously brought in HTTP2. That is a big problem for telcos. Telcos are not comfortable dealing with HTTP2. They are comfortable dealing with SS7 signaling. They are comfortable dealing with diameter, but not comfortable dealing with HTTP2. And the reason 3GPP did that, because they wanted to democratize the development, the standardization, the deployment, and the market adoption of all these technologies. HTTP2 is native to the web industry. It has a proven ecosystem of tools and practices and skills and whatnot. And that is why 3GPP took the conscious decision against the wishes of many service providers to go for HTTP2, which is very interesting. But that would require interoperability between HTTP2 and GTPC. That would require interoperability between HTTP2 and diameter. That would require interoperability of signaling services, of policy frameworks, of authentication services, of identity services, of end-to-end security. So it's very complex. The other big change for the first time we are going to see in 5G is this definition of common API framework that 5G has adopted. We do not have that in 3G, we do not have that in 4G. Now if these technology domains have to interoperate, we need a mindset change, we need a cultural shift. The legacy technology domains also have to move towards some of these new concepts that are being defined, whether it is the common API framework, whether it is network slicing, whether it is virtualization, whether it is softwareization and software-defined networks. So all of these things will be embraced. And how can I forget the CUPS, the control and user plane separation, which has also been defined by 3GPP for 5G, but it would also be deployed as part of the release 14 feature for 4G networks. Who would be deploying 4G? Who would be deploying release 14? So there are lots of interoperability challenges, and I think that is where there is this incumbent need for the entire ecosystem, for players within the ecosystem to start collaborating to make sure that these different technologies do not simply get deployed in the marketplace, but also are interoperable so that these tremendous tangible benefits can be delivered not just to us using smartphones, but also to these wonderful and exciting industries, whether it is Industry 4.0 or healthcare or manufacturing or energy providers or transport or healthcare and whatnot. That is where bulk of the ROI for 5G would come from. Bulk of the ROI for 5G would not come from people like us as consumers paying for smartphones. So I think those are some very interesting observations I would like to share with you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bhagwat. It was a really passionate plea for that brings us to the views from the panelists. Before I call upon Chairperson Mr. Sivasailam to make his concluding remarks, though we are running behind time, I would like to give the opportunity for maybe two.
Engineer, and my current question is around standardization, whether 5G in context to critical infrastructure and smart city that we talked about. You know, in BIS we are already defining some standard for the unified ICT backbone for smart cities already, and in next 1 or 2 years they should be on a rollout implementation and the ecosystem would be developed. Now my only question is that by the time the 5G comes to a deployment stage, what kind of disruption it could bring in and how we could come up with a smooth migration path when we already have an ICT ecosystem for the smart infrastructure with standards well in place with this new disruption that 5G will bring in. Anyway.
Is the question to Dr. Basu?
So I mean, I can try to address. It's so standards is a evolving process. So yes, at this frozen point of time, there is a certain framework that is there and a standard that is there. Whereas this technology, disruption, as you said, that 5G is capable of bringing, I think that standard will have to be rethought in this context and redeveloped. And the best thing would be if we can sit together and do that together.
Yeah,
right? So there has to be a convergence, as he said, as he pointed out. I think it is really game changer that the port, the CT, 3GPP CT, they are converging totally on IT technology, right? They are talking about HTTP protocol. They are talking about total cloud enabled. The data center is becoming the core. The old switching systems that we built are, and everything associated with it has been thrown out. The core has become totally IT enabled. So there is a convergence. So whatever is happening there and whatever 5G is going to bring, especially with IoT, we may have to rethink this time. That's all I can say.
If I may, I think, sir, it's so from a smart city perspective specifically, which I think was your example. I think it is, first of all, extremely important for the smart city mission or DIS or the stakeholders to define what are the use cases. That's the starting point. And that cannot be done by the 5G team, it cannot be done by the IT industry, it has to be done by a task force like what you have described. So the what, I think, is a starting point. Where the initiative that Pamela mentioned might come in handy is that are there things that are not on your wish list which can be enabled by this new technology? Can that be incorporated into your requirements? So that's where the first point of convergence is. The second point of convergence is in the how. You might have a certain view on the how today, based on perhaps you're looking at IoT and other things. But there is a strong amount of the how which can be brought in from this community. And again, it's from the communications side of the fence and the applications or the IT side of the fence that we have put together. The rest of it, I don't think you should standardize. Because that layer, whether it's implemented using a specific 5G standard or something else from the HTTP world or from cybersecurity, that I think is not something that you should potentially describe it to too much of detail. So I think there is a convergence in the what and perhaps a little bit in the how.
Thank you.
We enable all sorts of migration and evolution plans. We might want to even divide control and user plane traffic between 4G and 5G networks. You might use your LTE network for the control plane and the 5G new radio for your user plane. And this is the whole philosophy in 3GPP that says, you have to enable every different variation of evolution from what you have now to what you're going to have in 2 or 3 years' time. So that flexibility is the reason why we've revisited a lot of old established principles and thrown them away. So they're not actually relevant in the new world.
I am S.K. Biswas. I am Chief Signal and Telecommunication Engineer, Central Railway. I don't know whether my question will be fitting to this context, but it is a request to all the panelists. We are looking for a solution for the Indian Railways. We are already having GSM-based system that's called GSMR, which is available in the European Railways. They are also now migrating to LTER. But here, whether in this 5G forum, whether we are having any scope for dovetailing the railways requirement into the 5G technology, and if so, what railways can offer from our side. For example, we have huge land space, we have towers, we have entire right of way we can give. Precisely, I am looking for a techno-economical model where any 5G operator, potential 5G operator in the future or at the moment, can earmark some of the network resources for serving the railways emergency requirements. That is precisely being coined by the GSMR or LTER industry group. So there will be some resistance from that group because nobody wants to share their share of the chunk of the cake. But here, the industry, if they come out, we can offer our resources and come to a win-win situation Apart from this, we have frequency problem also. We have to buy the frequency from WPC. Earlier we used to get frequency free of cost. Now we have to pay at the same rate as the cellular operators are. Because my primary business is transportation, not a cellular operator. I can't really compare that price to with the companies giants like Reliance or XYZ. So if the panelist can throw some light on that, I will be obliged.
First of all, on the administrative side, let me assure you, I received a letter from Railway Board yesterday morning for being part of the 5G ecosystem which we are, of the forums which we have created, and also part of the subgroups. Certainly, railways will be there, possibly at the next meeting, and in a whole lot of other subgroups. There is a lot of areas where railways can participate. Offhand, I can identify 2 or 3 of them with a huge institutional support available on standards. RDSOs is a huge organization which is which itself works on that. So I thought that in standards, a good contribution would be possible from the railways. Apart from that, obvious areas, labs and use case scenarios, large-scale trials. These are 3 areas where we are working on in 5G forum, which I think railways will be part of it. Yes, it's going to be definitely an interesting one, which you have stated. A lot of application case scenarios which will be coming, which is actually the domain which is being handled by Mr. Ananta Krishna. So I assure you that you will hear about railways participation sooner rather than later.
No, I just want to split the T-yard and taking the specific railway requirements into the standards or something. So I would really strongly encourage that Indian Railway Signaling and Telecommunication Engineers should participate in TSDSI and should look at what are the requirements and what are the derivatives of these standards that we can form to address some of the specific requirements of the Indian Railways. I think that is very much possible to do. And since TSDSI is now an organizational partner of 3GPP, we are transposing the 3GPP standards. We can actually modify and we can make sure that some of those needs are met. So I think that is one aspect, and I would really strongly encourage the technical participation of the Indian Railway engineers into the TSDSI. That is sort of one aspect. And also the other aspect is related to using the railway resources for the deployment of the 5G applications and services. That of course is a aspect which I think he also said that we can value your contribution to participate in 5G high level forum and have those resources as a part of the test beds. And as a part of that, we can also see what kind of interoperability can be done with standards such as LTER or GSMR and the existing 5G standards, so that those also issues can be addressed. So I think there is a huge opportunity for the Indian Railways to work very closely with TSDSI, and we would welcome that participation.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry, today, the reality is that every constable has his own smartphone for which the police force is not paying. All they have to do is pay for a closed user group, OPEX, on a monthly basis, which is not very expensive. And suddenly the constable on the beat is able to send a video / audio / message, whatever, to anybody in this, and create WhatsApp groups. With the whole power of the ecosystem comes to play. I mean, Tetra and all are way behind. Nobody wants, and it's so expensive. Then the police have to provide all the handsets, and then you have to look after them. I mean, they don't have the budget for these things. But the problem comes when there is a Kumbh Mela. You all know, but there are 500,000 people assembling in a square kilometer or less, and then of course no cellular system will work, and least of all the police's phones. And then they get desperate because they don't. There's no in the standards of, we don't have a way of prioritizing one group of users. The commercial operators don't have that ability in terms of access. They can't guarantee the police that their phones will have a certain amount of access to the network. They get jammed out. So the last time such a thing happened, we actually set up for the police a Wi-Fi based system on a frequency which is not being used, to enable them to ensure guaranteed access, even when there are millions of people there whose phones anyway don't work. So it's interesting that we have such unmet needs, not just the railways but in the police also.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, and I think it's one we're going to come back to tomorrow on the 5G panel tomorrow, because whether we talk about railways or whether we talk about public safety, this whole new series of industry sectors that will be end users of the 5G system, from a standardisation point of view, there is no assumption as to whether that service will be delivered by a private network operator or a public network operator. So as far as the standards are concerned, the railway system could have a virtual private network perhaps, where they lease capacity from a public network operator together with their private network. They could have a whole independent network. I'm sure you're aware of what's happening in 3GPP in defining the future rail system. It's the replacement for GSMR. That work has been ongoing now for more than 3 years in 3GPP. We're actually moving to the second phase, so the requirements capture work has already been done based on input from the Union de Chemin de Fer in France, the UIC, the International Railway Union effectively. But if India has special requirements, it's getting rather late to bring them to the standardisation body, because the work is now moving on to the normative elements of work. I think the important point is, and it comes back to the comments about public safety, there is no assumption as to in the future whether this will be services provided in the public network or private network or a combination of both.
Just
Last
couple,
year I happened to
points.
meet for a very minuscule amount of bandwidth for railway specific applications. For example, today we are going to spend thousands of crores of rupees for something, a system called communication based train control. That will be a very, I would say, vendor specific deployment. Whereas if we spend this much money to our 5G network, maybe at much lesser cost, we can reserve some small budget specifically earmarked for that. Something like network reserve, or you can say some virtual pipe or whatever it is.
Excuse me,
if the standard body can
is offline. So, with my permission, I think we're running too much behind time. We'll have to continue this offline during the lunch, maybe, and I'm sure there's going to be vigorous engagement on this. I now would request Mr. Srisalam to give his concluding remarks.
This is how as exciting it is, and it runs for over 5 hours. Just imagine the depth of the discussions, and some of it which could not be which was not brought out by the members was brought out by Mr. Pradeep Bharadwaj, all of which was discussed in this forum. So I think this gives an impression and definitely a signal that we are on the right track. It's therefore easy for me to request you, this August body, a lot of you to send in your ideas so that we could expand this system, because as one of the thoughts which came up at the last meeting of the 5G forum is, what is going to be the time duration of the application layer subcommittee which Mr. Radhakrishna heads? And it was told that this is going to be a perpetual one, and that was brought out by your question. So therefore, it's an infinite number of things. So therefore, you can only have certain basic norms and standards or basic principles on which you will deploy. And one of them, which was a key item identified, we thought it's a big thing, but it turned out to be a no-brainer. Almost every one of you mentioned it, interoperability. And that's the bedrock of how things will move. The use of software, the IT systems getting into 5G, that was part of it. And we are pretty good at that. As a nation, we are good at that. So we should be able to leverage all this. And this is what we are also working on. I would conclude by requesting this August body to please send in your issues so that it could be discussed at forums or by individual members of the subcommittee. In this, I need to introduce, even if you don't know to whom it is to be sent, just ensure that it is sent to Mr. Patak and he will take care that there might be cross-cutting issues which you might have. So we generally do the work of Secretariat and then keep bouncing it out to more than one committee for their consideration. And it has, in the last 3 meetings, for the last 3 meetings, I must say, it has paid rich dividends. I'm grateful to all of you for the interest you have shown in the 5G systems which we are planning to get to India and develop its ecosystem, and we solicit your participation and cooperation in making it happen. Thank you. Thank you very much.